Hey G fans, today once again is Godzilla Dissection number 2, and as I said, these weren't going to go in chronological order, they're just going to be completely random for the fun of it. And today I'm doing once again one of my top favorites. Unfortunately, it was bumped off my top 10 by the newest Godzilla 2014 film. However, it's still one of the most creative and just one of the most hard-hitting Godzilla films of all time for me. And I'm speaking about 1975's Terror of MechaGodzilla. Yes, the finale to the original series, the Showa series, and it was also the last time that director Honda would get to direct a Godzilla film. And yeah, I have a whole lot to say about this movie. And where to begin with this movie? Well, I guess I should start with my history of the movie. As a longtime Godzilla fan, I sought this one out for many freaking years, trying to track it down. And for a long time, it was almost impossible for, your average movie buyer to get. It wasn't at any local stores. It was hard to find online. However, Classic Media finally did release it on DVD on those little special booklet cases, and what do you know, I have the whole Classic Media collection, Gojira, Rodan, World Gargantuans. But yeah, I finally got it, and I believe Terror of MechaGodzilla was the second to last Showa film for me to finally track down and see. So, I just have the honor of being the very last one I saw. That Son of Godzilla was the very last one I had to finally track down and witness, and I hadn't seen the whole Showa series. But yeah, Terror of MechaGodzilla was one I definitely saw for a long time, and then I finally saw it, and yeah, it was definitely a profound remark when I first saw it the very first time, and then after that, I just knew I was gonna love this one endlessly. And for a while there, it really was on my top 10. I just could not stop loving it. One of my favorites of the Showa era. So I guess I should go into some of the history of the movie. Much like Godzilla vs. Biollante, this one the story came from a result of a story contest from actually one of the few female, as far as I know of, actually the only female writer for a Godzilla movie. The story contest was held only 4 months after the 1974 Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla. And then from there, because of budgetary reasons, it went through a few drafts. And then voila, Terror of MechaGodzilla was born. Known as MechaGodzilla's Counterattack, I believe, in the Japanese title. But yeah, so now we have some of that, the basic story background. Now let's get to the production. The movie was made in a very short amount of time, which is I don't think is any real shock to Toho Godzilla fans, which people know about the struggle behind the production on these types of films. But this one went through even more rapid production than most of them ever had to go through. I've heard rumors that it was supposedly done in just under a month or two, if not less. And in some of the editing, you could see that it was really forced and rushed. But I'll get to that when I'm talking about the review of the film overall. But yeah, this film was coming out at a time when Japanese TV was getting really big, especially the Japanese kaiju genre, thanks to, lo and behold, Eiji Tsuburaya had started that whole the Ultraman phenomenon back in early 1970s. But by that time, 1975 was in full force, and movies at the box office were feeling it around that time, as I've researched. And Terror of MechaGodzilla was unfortunately one of the biggest victims of that. As far as I've researched, it is the lowest grossing of the Godzilla films of all 20, I guess you could go ahead and say all 30 of them, Japanese or American or not. It was the lowest grossing Godzilla movie of all time. It sold less than 1 million tickets, which is really a tragedy when you get down to the content of the film. It really deserved much more esteem, I'd say. I think it needed a much more grandiose welcoming. However, due to, I guess, maybe the nature of the Godzilla series at that point, it already slipped into decline. And, like I said, the onslaught of Japanese monsters on TV was growing incredibly popular around that time. And yeah, I suppose those are the reasons we could all look at it for why the movie declined at the box office more than any other Godzilla film. But luckily, none has ever slipped so far since. And this was the final film of the Showa era, as I've said before. And so, with this one, Toho finally decided to say, you know what, we're going to take a break. And we will be back. And almost a decade later, 9 years later, they would reboot the series with Return of Godzilla. So now that we have some of the history of the film out of the way, let's delve right into what makes this movie great for me. Now, first off, in order to really embrace what this film means to me, you have to look at the whole scope of the Showa era. Now, I'm a fan of the Showa era, most definitely. Most definitely. I love it. Some of my favorite Godzilla films are from the Showa era, the original run. Now, they started off, it was a good balance they had going. It started off really dark with the original Gojira, of course. The more run-of-the-mill Godzilla Raids Again, which is not a bad film, but definitely lackluster when compared to the original, of course. And didn't really follow up on the dark content of it, but it also was not cheesy as cheesy as I guess you could say as the ones that would come later on. So it reached some kind of middle ground that was just not very well done per se compared to what would come next in the franchise. But overall, like I said, not a bad film. And then we reached the early '60s. We're talking King Kong versus Godzilla. Kind of campy with the monster action in some senses, but also comedic satire on the Japanese culture in a lot of ways. So it was overall a very good film. Then we have Mothra vs. Godzilla once again, and pretty much Godzilla pretty much Godzilla's darkest since the 1954 film as far as the Showa era goes, and that was pretty much the peak of how back to his roots he would get. After that, he would take on the hero stance in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Now, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and Invasion of Astro Monster, these are more lighthearted fares, and they're definitely growing up more odder, in the story structure, but they were still, very high budget films for their day, and they were respectable to watch. And then it came to later '60s. We had Sea Monster and Son of Godzilla, which were definitely taking Godzilla in a more friendlier and very offbeat direction from where he started. No More Ifukube. We had Masaru Satao with these often very different scores, I guess is one way to put them. Very different. Definitely not as menacing or imposing as Ifukube's work. But still, Sea Monster, it's debatable, but doesn't hold up that well today as opposed to other ones around the same time. Son of Godzilla, to me, I actually like that one, despite it having a number of flaws that bring it down. For overall, I don't think it's as bad as people say. And then we had, the grandiose Strong Monsters, which was just a kaiju spectacle, another way to describe it. And then the dark times hit. The dark times of the early '70s for Godzilla. Kicking all off 1969 with Godzilla's Revenge. Coming off the heyday of Destroying All Monsters came this stock footage, overly child-friendly, really almost non-Godzilla related movie known as Godzilla's Revenge as we know it. I believe All Monsters Attack in the Japanese title. That really already soured the Showa era right there. And then, Godzilla's Hedorah was not a bad film, but definitely very odd, and once again, a very poignant film to an extent, but also really just I guess you could say a clusterfuck as far as art direction and what exactly they put into the movie. And also, Godzilla was still definitely the hero. And then we had, the massacres, Godzilla vs. Gigan versus Megalon. No matter how much you like Gigan, no matter how much you like Megalon or Jet Jaguar, you gotta admit those two films are definitely the lowest part of the Showa era, almost, besides maybe Godzilla's Revenge. In that they were, campy, poorly made. They have a few merits on their own when you view them in depth, which I can go into definitely when I do my dissection of them. However, as it is, I'm doing reference point. The point is, at that point, the films were really getting just really lost, and they definitely just had no kind of theme to them of any kind at that point. Just stock footage and low budget monster action. Then came 1974. The film started reaching a peak again with Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla. Now, Masaru Sato was doing the score, but it was very different than what he had done previously. It was very energetic and jazzy. That kept the film going. It had a much stronger story than the last ones, and we had more awesome kaiju. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Megalon or Jet Jaguar, but King Caesar's not a bad monster at all, and MechaGodzilla is one of the most popular ones to date. So, introducing one of Godzilla's most popular foes, and having a really nice tone to it and a nice pace, unlike the much more horribly paced Godzilla vs. Megalon and Gigan. Godzilla vs. Megalon stands as one of the all-time fan favorites. And then, coming off that very bumpy ride in the 60s, the late 60s and early 70s, then we come to the conclusion, Terror of MechaGodzilla. So where does this film stand, emotionally, cinematographically, editing-wise, amounts of stock footage and how the film is made? So I guess I'll start with human characters. Now, unlike, I'd say, the last 5 films, although granted, Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla had some memorable characters in there. The ones before, like Gigan, MechaGodzilla, Hedorah, especially All Monsters Attack, did not had one to zip, relatable characters that you actually gave a damn about. I would say damn near none. However, Terror of MechaGodzilla took it to a whole new level, even surpassing Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla, if you ask me, with the human characters were very interesting. The writing was very well done on that part. Even though it still involves aliens from the third black hole, whatever the hell that means. The point is that they were interesting, and human characters were, for the most part, well acted, and you can see the motivations, and they best of all, they actually have a lot of emotion going into it. Now, while there are a number of characters, I suppose the main trio would simply be Ichinose, played by Katsuhiko Sasaki. He was in Godzilla vs. Megalon. He was one of the stars in that one. And he's a pretty well-grounded character. And then we have Akihiko Hirata playing Dr. Mifune, the mad scientist. And even though it's, say, not as good as some of the things he's done in the past, I actually liked his character in Godzilla Sea Monster. I definitely, of course, loved him in Godzilla, the original Godzilla film. But here, he's a pretty interesting character. Definitely a little over the top mad scientist at times, but still very enjoyable for what the movie is. Definitely, I definitely like him in this movie. And then, of course, we have, to me, one of the strongest aspects of the film, which speaks a lot for a giant monster movie. One of the strongest films is one of the human characters, and that human character is Katsura, the daughter of Dr. Mifune, played by Tomoko Ai. This character really just speaks to the writing and just the legacy of this film. Here we have a giant monster movie. One of the most intriguing things about it is this female character who, goes through a lot in this movie. We see her transform both physically and mentally many times. And and I think about this movie, it has a great sense of tragedy to it, and what could have been, and just, you just gotta love for that. And I think that's a lot of the themes in this movie. Among them, redemption and once again, just taking it way back to the original Gojira. The price of victory, sometimes a sacrifice, just like Serizawa sacrificed himself in that movie. Spoilers for a movie that is well over 4 years old by now. Sacrificing this one for Tomoko Ai's character, Katsura. And like I was saying, I love direction. Director Honda, he always had an aura of seriousness that he put into the films that made it just a lot more well-grounded in reality for for even for a kaiju film, as opposed to things like Godzilla's Hedorah, Megalon. The characters feel more real, and you take it just a little bit more seriously than the other ones, and you gotta respect that about it. Now, what I like about this one, as far as human characters are, there's a lot of interaction, and they're doing interesting things, and that includes the alien villains. You see, once again, no more aluminum foil bases this time, unlike in the last one. I did not like the base that they had in the last film so much, and this one, you still don't see too much of it. However, production-wise, can't really blame them. And for what it is, it looks great. And, again, this film uses a bit of violence to help make it, take it to that higher level as far as the other Godzilla movies. And I'd say this, in a good way, made it a lot more intense for the human characters. And the story, the writing was just very intriguing. But honestly, by 1975, the story of aliens and monsters has been used. Let me think. Invasion of Astro Monster, Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla's Hedorah. I won't count that. Well, he does come from space. It's not really involving aliens and saucers type of stuff. So, but Godzilla vs. Gigan, most definitely. Godzilla vs. Megalon, not really aliens. They're subterranean people. And, of course, good old Godzilla versus MechaGodzilla. So the whole alien thing had been done a number of times. But the thing is here, they actually made it interesting again by just making the aliens a little more brutal in what they do and making that whole plot line more intriguing. Now, another great aspect of this movie to take into factor, the return of Akira Ifukube. Now, when you put Shiro Honda's take on Godzilla and combine it with Ifukube, you always get gold. And let me say, even though this film uses a lot of the same themes, the same number of themes, like Godzilla theme, Titanosaurus theme, MechaGodzilla theme, I still love this score so much because it's really different from all of the scores in the Showa era, except for maybe the original. Even then, it's still quite different from that one, but at least those two are relatable because the scores in both of them are very dark and downcast. And that's what I love about this movie. I love the music in the prior film, Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla. However, I really do love this version of MechaGodzilla's theme. It's too bad we may never hear it again alongside that monster. However, it was just incredible hearing it. I just loved it. I love, of course, this film. We all know I'll say debuted because we had heard it in the 1954 film. However, this is a film where that familiar theme, that march theme, became Godzilla's theme. It went from being the Japanese military theme to his. And my God, it sounds so badass in this movie. And you can respect Godzilla still because you just hear that theme. And like I said, excluding Godzilla's MechaGodzilla, a lot of the Showa films up to this point had lackluster scores, or at most stock scores that were still not that great. With their stock scores, how great can they really be? But this film really just took it musically to new heights. I love the electronic feel about it. I love how sad and somber it is. It really matches the story. It just meshes together very well. To, like I said, have that impact on you. So, but music covered in Honda's directing style, definitely leaning towards a human-centered story that, is definitely cohesive and makes you interested. I guess the main thing now is to get into the monsters. This, as much as I liked 1974 MechaGodzilla movie, the suit you see in that Godzilla movie, it's not bad. It's definitely not one of the worst, but it's definitely, it's definitely not one of my favorites at the same time, though. The friendly, I guess you could say puppy dog looking face, and the spines, I don't really like to look to them. However, be that as it may, I still, be as it may, I think it was an alright suit. Now, I love what Honda did with this one. You can see the direction he was trying to take it back from. Honda was really trying to reclaim Godzilla as the darker movies like he was before, like a Mothra vs. Godzilla and the original. I love that. We still have the same overall suit design, however the face was remolded to have a much fiercer and meaner look for Godzilla. So, even though Godzilla's still the hero in this one, you could still appreciate what they did to try and take him back to his roots, at least to an extent. And just for that alone, 1975 Godzilla's suit for me is probably one of my favorites. Just the subtle differences right there in the face, the angrier look to it just really speaks to me on a number of levels, and I just love it. And, as a Godzilla, even though he's a hero in this one, it's one of the few ones where Godzilla's a hero where I actually loved it. It just, even though he's not, I wouldn't say he's too much at the center of the story, most definitely not, probably. But he plays his role and he plays it well. Now, MechaGodzilla. MechaGodzilla looks pretty much almost exactly the same as he did in the last film, except for a few subtle differences. First of all, the obvious thing, the MG2 logo on his arm, which is pretty cool. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but in some shots it appears he has, like, larger fingers. They look a little more jagged. But mostly overall the same. But I definitely like MechaGodzilla in this one. Like I said, his theme sounds great. It definitely matches him. And his fight scenes are just great. I love them. And I love the whole secret weapon. They took the last film and said they just really turned it on its head. Said there's no way to beat him this time. It was incredible. And to Titanosaurus, a monster that I honestly do like. I like the design very much. Very freaking much. Am I a fan of his roar? No. No, I'm not a fan of his roar. If he ever was to appear in a future Godzilla film, I would definitely advise a newly updated roar. However, that being said, Titanosaurus' roar is not enough to ruin the film for me, not even one bit. And, he's an impressive kaiju too, but he hasn't appeared in the other movies. He's not the only one to suffer the type of fate, but for him especially, it's kind of tragic. Especially being in the film that he's in, it's one of the ones that's lesser known, that was popular amongst G fans. So that covered 3 monsters, and I love how they did that. It's the reversal of what happened in the last film. Now it's 1 against 2. One lone hero against 2 villains. Really raised the stakes. I love how this movie just took the time to raise the stakes in this one, as opposed to the last one. Just really wouldn't. Unlike Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla, Godzilla vs. Gigan, which was basically rehashed for Godzilla vs. Megalon. Terror MechaGodzilla really tried to take it to new heights in basically every level. Well, musically, different tone for it, the stakes as far as human characters, and as well as the monsters, raising the stakes. And that's just well done writing. And now I'd definitely say special effects and Han's directing style, how it, really helped that along to really make. I'd say, a lot of I won't discredit those movies so much. There's no memorable shots in those films, like Megalon and Gigan. However, this film did it a whole lot better with the fact that there were some really nice, imposing, well-done shots. Like, I think everyone who knows this movie well. And for me, the thing, as soon as I saw it, it really sold me in this movie halfway in, was just that first time Godzilla appears out of the shadows. It was just awesome. One of Godzilla's best entrances ever in a Godzilla movie. Just hands down. One of the best. Just coming out of the shadows like that, the slow reveal, and then the fighting starts. And you hear the theme pounding along with it. Freaking great. Love it. Love it. And just the way, the humans, some Godzilla films struggle with this, but in this one is done very well. The human action is intertwined very well with the monster action, and what the monsters do affects the humans, what the humans do affects the monsters. That's well done. Before he goes up on awards, to take a note of this, when Brian Kitamura was saying that he loved the 70s Godzilla films the most, maybe should pay just a little more attention to what they were about, and they weren't about kung fu scenes. As for the explosions handled by Terushi Nakano, no jokes aside though, this film definitely feels like just a higher tier than what we've seen before. There's a lot better special effects in this one, especially there's an actual city destruction scene. It's not stock footage this time. And it's great. Even the last film, because there was MechaGodzilla, lacked a city destruction scene. We saw him destroy, I believe, literally one building and I think an oil refinery, but other than that, it was pretty much all wilderness, which wasn't bad at all. But this film really took it to that level where you really see Tokyo getting smashed, and you just love it. The Transformers MechaGodzilla destroying Tokyo, one of the best scenes of the movie. Yeah, the effects were pretty good, and best of all, like I said, sparse stock footage. Only just like 1 or 2 second clip of stock footage, but like I said, like Invasion of Astro Monster was handled very well and delicately. So you don't really mind so much there was a little bit of stock footage. It can be easily forgiven, and I don't hold it against them. Now, as far as editing wise, like I should say, this movie was, of course, as we already know, had a very rushed production, had a lower, you can't really tell, it had a lower budget than the ones previous to it. So some things were not handled properly as they should have been, probably. Some alien reveals are just done, literally a still shot of the ship they're on, and the ships, we briefly see them briefly at the finale. As before, the lack of an alien base really in this one. However, these things to me can be easily forgiven because I know the financial and the production backstory of this film. Of course, not every person will bother to look it up and stuff like that. But as a Godzilla fan in general, I was not going to be too put off from that. But I just hope people know my opinion on it. I guess I should say, those little small editing quirks sometimes do bug me. There's little things here and there. However, the film, like I said, was on a very rushed schedule, and I take it for what it is, and it's done well for the most part. Now, as for running time, of course, it's shorter than the Godzilla films from the early '60s, like Mothra vs. Godzilla and Ghidorah the Monster. Those movies reaching as far as 90 something minutes. This movie is I think a little over 80. And I think if Honda had been given a proper budget and time, I think this movie probably would have really stood out as one of the best, undoubtedly, because it probably would have been a full 90 something minutes. Had probably even a little more story in there, maybe a little more monster action. But for what we get, I'm very freaking pleased about it. And then to top it all off, Terror MechaGodzilla does have, in my opinion, one of the best Godzilla movie endings out of all 30 films, American and or Japanese. It really does. The somber music by Fukube, the shots of the human characters mourning the death of the tragic character Katsura, and that really very awesome shot of Godzilla swimming back out into the ocean, under the evening rays of the sun. It really fills you with really just a lot of emotion to it, and a lot of Godzilla films at that time were definitely lacking in that quality, emotions, making it feel human again. And for that, I'm just really grateful this movie's ever even made. So that's my overall score for Terror MechaGodzilla would definitely be, I'd definitely rate it around, I hate to keep doing decimals, but I would definitely rate it around 8.5. Definitely like a B plus. Like, we want to give it that A. A few things hold it back from having an A, but overall, it's still one of my favorite Godzilla movies of all time. Just really well done film, in my opinion. I'm hoping someday something similar to it will arise. Who knows what the future holds? And that is the conclusion of episode 2 of Godzilla Dissected.